the way that finance has worked for so long is people will come in and they'll say, hey, this is what I got, this is what I want. And then financial planners will stack a whole series of best guesses, multiply them by himself, look out 60 years, and then say, hey, you got a pretty good chance of being all right if these assumptions are anything close to real. And then what happens? We say, if inflation is 2%, and then we get into a year where inflation's 8%, that's just already making people anxious. But now they remember their financial planner said, oh, all of that work that we did saying your future is rosy was based on an assumption of 2%, and now we're not. Does that mean now I'm scared about inflation? I'm scared about affording groceries or what this is going to do to my business. And now all of a sudden, I also have to worry about all that work that we did last year for my financial plan, if it's relevant at all. And that's frustrating, right? And so again, what is your anchor? What is the thing that you come back to all the time to remind yourself, hey, this is my vital sign, and my vital signs suggest that I am on track. Josh,
coming at you from the new spot.
Happy Saturday and fall. It's beautiful fall.
Yep.
Beautiful fall day outside. And we're anxious to get out there.
Good college football today.
A lot of good. Go Big Orange.
So we got to hurry up.
We're on the clock. Hey, so we do want to take an opportunity. We've been busy the past couple weeks, and so we're working some overtime on a Saturday to try to get you guys some content, and we're anxious to share, because this is one of the better topics I feel like we get to talk about, because it's really why I think people work with us, right? They're trying to solve the problem. They're trying to answer the question, am I okay? Am I on track? Does my future look as optimistic as I want it to be? I think in looking ahead, that's a very difficult question to answer at any point in time. But given what we as a country and as a world have been through the past few years, I think people are just exhausted, and it's hard.
That's really a good word. It's exhausted.
Yeah.
Like that's a perfect word.
And I think people are just, it's hard to be optimistic. It's hard to find hope sometimes. We went into COVID. There was a lot of people that were just looking for reasons to hate people. And, some of it, like, I'm not trying to dismiss or make anybody feel like they don't have legitimate concerns. It's just, there was a point in time for a good stretch of months where we were, people were shooting people in the streets. People were burning down things because they were angry. On top of that, you had COVID, the scary new virus that was, having its effect on the globe. And now we're coming out of COVID, thank heavens. But we're realizing, hey, when you shut down the earth for a period of time, it's really hard to turn this thing back on. And that's presenting its own problems with inflation and supply chain. And, throughout all of this, what's happened to people's retirement portfolios and investment portfolios is they have went up and down and up and down and up and down. And the volatility has been
more down than up.
Significant. Yeah. And at this point in the year, more down than up.
And on top of that, you have inflation that's been weakening everything else.
It's been rough. And so how do you find optimism in times like this? That's been the hard part. And we're talking about some big geopolitical and, an epidemic kind of thing, but this happens all the time to people. Like, now everybody's experiencing a strong dose of it.
Right.
But for so many people, they get very strong doses. I mean, we've talked to people that have went through, cancer scares. They've went through divorces and deaths and, family disruptions and personal disruptions, losses of jobs, changes of careers. And there's always going to be moments of kind of just overwhelming anxiety.
So yesterday at our First Friday event, it was funny because I had multiple people, not our clients, that came up to me. What do you think about the markets? They're kind of like in panic mode. But all of our clients that were there, they were just enjoying the event. There was no conversation about what the markets did yesterday, and this past week was insane with the markets up and down. But the people that weren't our clients were the ones that were coming up to me going, What are y'all doing? Like, are y'all in panic mode? Blah, blah, blah. Like, so it's just funny to see the reaction between somebody that goes through our coaching and what we do as a system compared to somebody that doesn't have that system in place.
Yeah, and it's really not like some magic potion, right? Like our clients are still real people with real concerns. The difference is they have anchoring points, right? And I think, when you're facing scary times, having something to fall back on that's a trustworthy tool as a benchmark reference to remind yourself, hey, my feet are actually still on the ground. Like the room is spinning, but my foot's on the ground, and that's giving me some sort of comfort through this. The question is how do you anchor yourself? Like in the world of finance, there's copious. I mean, like you can. I was deleting emails this morning and probably deleted 7 emails inviting me to subscribe or listen to a webinar on some new research tool. Just giving me access to so much information. I can research every company. I can look at quarterly or annual reports. I can listen to the CEO talk. I can interview or look at the performance of fund managers and fund companies and look at, all kinds of economic data, global data, leadership data. The problem is digesting a whole bunch of information still brings us to a point where all we get is a educated assumption. And at the end of the day, an educated assumption is still an assumption.
Still an assumption.
Still an assumption. So that's problematic. Part of that is because, if I take a fact plus a fact, I generally get a factual outcome, right? 2 plus 2 is 4, right? But when I take an assumption and I say, well, what about almost 2 or about 2 plus about 2 is about 4? Well, now we just get a broader range. Yeah, it's pretty close to 4.
There's a 40% chance that you're 80%.
Yeah. But the thing is that almost 4 could be 3.5, or it could be 4.5, and those are, those could be multiplied and be dramatically off. And so when we're the way that finance has worked for so long is people will come in and they'll say, hey, this is what I got, this is what I want, and then financial planners will stack a whole series of best guesses, multiply them by himself, look out 60 years. And then say, hey, you got a pretty good chance of being all right if these assumptions are anything close to real. And then what happens? We say if inflation is 2%, and then we get into a year where inflation's 8%, that's just already making people anxious. But now they remember their financial planner said, oh, all of that work that we did saying your future is rosy was based on an assumption of 2%, and now we're not. Does that mean now I'm scared about inflation? I'm scared about affording groceries or what this is going to do to my business. And now all of a sudden, I also have to worry about all that work that we did last year for my financial plan if it's relevant at all. And that's frustrating, right? And so again, what is your anchor? What is the thing that you come back to all the time to remind yourself, hey, this is my vital sign, and my vital signs suggest that I am on track. And I know, the market goes down all the time. And so far, up until this current one that we can say safely that it has gone up and higher every single time. Right. And so if history repeats itself, we know that more companies will come to market, more people will come to America, and more people around the globe will start to invest in global markets and invest in American company and in American ideas. And companies are just going to get better with money, and people are going to make more money and spend more money, and we can assume that the market, we'll make it through this. There is another side to this story, and we can't lose sight of that. But when it's scary, and finding your feet in scary times is hard. It's the old thing, like when you're starting to get that panic attack, what do? You take a deep breath and exhale and count to 8, and take another deep breath and exhale and count to 8, and you remind yourself that you're still breathing and your feet are on the ground.
It's never fun to lose money, though.
It's not. It's not fun to lose money. And so that's what Total Term, the tool that we're going to dig into, can give us. Before we jump in, do you have any insight as to, kind of people going through this kind of stuff, or do you want to dive on in?
Yeah, let me just dive in.
All right. So when we say Total Term, we are essentially talking about a vital sign. So Total Term is the financial vital sign. Total Term as a financial vital sign measures your ability to be financially independent. So this could be, choosing to retire
without relying on the market.
This tool pulls out every assumption that you could imagine. So in this case, we're saying you are financially independent. Once your vital sign gets to a certain level, you can choose to retire, you can choose to keep working, but your needs can and will be met if you're, and we have strong confidence, and you should have strong confidence as long as you see a vital sign of X, right?
Right.
And so these, are a little, like, some of our vital signs are very individualized, and can vary, can be quote unquote healthy or within range or without, outside of range. It becomes pretty individualized sometimes. This is one where we kind of just want to see everybody's number get north of 25, and to be able to call yourself financially independent. And there's some tools that we have to help you look into the future and again, pull out some assumptions, and we'll talk about all that, and we'll give a little demo too. So if you're just listening, maybe jump over to YouTube as well and actually watch some of this demo so you can see it. If you have the app that we use to help our clients monitor their financial vital signs, you can follow along. Hopefully you'll learn the app a little bit better today. And if this sounds like something you want, we've made it really accessible to everyone out there. And all you got to do is shoot us an email, and we'll get you set up. So Total Term estimates the number of years a client could live on their current assets in their current lifestyle if nothing changed. So Josh,
take the market volatility out.
Yep. No,
none of that matters.
All we're talking about right now is how much money do you spend, and how, satisfied are you with your lifestyle right now?
Mm-hmm.
And so in this, Total Term is an aggregation of many, many different factors that are also monitored inside the app. So what we're looking at when we look at Total Term, and we'll talk about some big effects here, but let's assume I have a net worth of $1 million. And then let's assume I spend $100,000 a year. My Total Term score is 10, right? The key here is that understanding, we're not assuming any growth. It's just 10. It's my spending divided by my net worth.
Right.
It's very matter of fact. Once we start to get around 25, we understand that the assets do appreciate over the long term. So we could assume some small amount of growth. And obviously the more growth we assume, the more risk we have to take. But the tool starts to let you know, hey, this is what you need to accomplish to get from where you are to where you're going. And if you average this kind of net worth growth a year, you're on track. And so that's what we're trying to build. This just here shows, again, it's net worth divided by annual living expenses. So, there's the example that I just shared, $1 million net worth, $100,000 spend annually, total term is 10. So why is this such an important vital sign? Of all the things that we do with money, really, I think what people choose to engage us, or when they choose to engage us, what they're trying to do is put anxiety to rest.
Mm-hmm.
So they come in and they sit down and they just say, "Hey, Brandon, hey, Josh, I don't really intend to necessarily hire you today, but I would love to know if I'm on track, if I'm doing okay. Is there anything that you see that's going to derail me?" And so they're just trying to ask these, what they feel is a simple question. And when I first started in this industry, I thought it was a simple question to answer. Yeah, let me crunch some numbers.
Yeah, run a Monte Carlo scenario.
Let me do some analysis.
It's simple.
Send you on your way. Looks like you're all right.
But what 30% chance that there's a 20% chance you'll make it.
Like yeah, and they have no understanding of what that is, and they're leaving probably feeling more anxious because they just stared at a bunch of graphs and we talked about numbers forever, and most people have a little bit of anxiety around that kind of stuff. So we weren't solving any problems, and that the industry doesn't do a good job too often of solving any problems, and a lot of people only feel more anxious when they come and engage any financial professional. It's a rare, if you have a financial professional out there and you can walk out of their office like feeling comforted, feeling safe, and knowing that you're on track and you can see evidence of it, and they're producing step-by-step, monitoring check-ins to where it's like, hey, I told you needed to do this, this, and this for the past 6 months. You did all those things. Here's the progress you made towards your goal, right? That's the kind of stuff that makes people understand the process, not saying, hey, see this line and it goes up 2.3% at a 14 degree angle and this and that and probability. Like, that's not helping anyone. So questions like, how am I doing? Do I have enough money? They seem simple. They're kind of vague, but they require discussion, right? What are you actually trying to figure out? We were talking to a client earlier, and he said he thinks a lot of times that question, like, why are people, I asked the question, why do you think people are so emotional about money? I meet people all the time. They're like, money's just a tool. I'm like, okay, yeah, it's just a tool. You're right. But let's talk about some things. And then they start getting really emotional. You challenge their financial way of thinking, and there's a lot of emotions that come out. It's like, wait a second, we were talking about nobody gets emotional over a hammer. Right.
Right.
I don't know anyone that would get angry, about a hammer losing value or increasing in value. Like, nobody,
or using it in a way that it's not intended for.
Right. And so people don't get too emotional about tools most of the time, but we do get emotional about money. And so, just curious as to what this client had to say, I asked him, why do you think that is? And he said, it's not necessarily about the money, but it's about what the money allows for in accomplishing things that he finds important to accomplish, to care for the people that he loves, to be able to travel and make memories, and, all these things that we are relying on a scarce resource to give us access to fulfillment in our life, and life itself is a scarce resource. So relying on a scarce resource to accomplish and make the most out of a scarce resource, that's the issue, right? Where there's only a maximum amount of money we'll make. There's only a maximum amount of life that we'll have. And sometimes it's scary because we start to think, am I doing the right thing with this dollar at the right time? Amazon's telling me I should look in here at the newest things, or, I think, if my living room only had this, it'd be a more comfortable living room. So we get a little anxious. I don't know about anybody else, but if I've had a long, hard week, I enjoy spending a little money on the weekend. It's what do they call that? Retail therapy. So that kind of stuff is it's kind of rewarding for it's a dump of, serotonin or whatever else goes on in the brain. And, it can be rewarding quickly, but what we realize is every time we go for that quick hit, that quick high, we're foregoing or delaying those things that will truly make us satisfied and happy in life. And that's what we want to focus on. That's the conversation that when we sit down with someone, we have to pull back the layers and peel back the onion to really say, okay, what is it that drives your happiness? What is it that at the end of life you need people remembering that you accomplished? And let's focus on those things and try to get there, and use the tool money to help us get there quick, or as quick as possible. Breaking apart total term by its underlying components. So we measure a couple other vital signs: liquid term, qualified term, real estate term, and business term. Basically, if you're saving money, right? So we measure cash flows. So if I spend money, if money leaves me, I can pay bills. I can spend it on stuff, and some of it's important stuff, but stuff nonetheless, electricity, whatever, or the new shoes, or stuff. I can spend it on taxes, or I can save it. So those are the only four things that we can do with money. And then if I choose to save it, I'm going to put it in one of four buckets, right? I can put it into accessible liquid places, like a checking account, a savings account, a taxable investment account, a safe, I can safe in my house,
shoebox under the mattress,
whatever, mason jar in the backyard, or I can put it into a qualified bucket, which means typically it's harder to access right now. For example, a retirement account, a 401k. We actually, in our tool, and this isn't necessarily technically right, so if you're listening, you can get angry about it, but we classify annuities as qualified money. And the reason why is because if you want money out of your annuity before you are allowed to get it, you have to pay heavy fees. So basically, we determine that anything that is hard to get, you have to wait to get, or if it's going to cost you money or taxes to get
take it
out, a penalty to get it, then we're going to call that qualified money. You could also put it away inside of a business if you own a business. So, Josh and I, we put money back into our business every time we have income come in. And that's growing the business's value. So that's growing my net worth as well.
Which affects your business term.
Exactly. And then the last one is real estate. We can purchase real estate. We have a primary residence. So I have my residence. Additionally, every time I pay my mortgage, I have more equity in my home. I can have investment properties and land and leases and all this kind of stuff. So that would all fall under the real estate term. But essentially, every time I choose to save money, one of my terms is getting higher. Those terms aggregate into my total term box. And so every time I save money, that where I choose to put it is becoming a healthier, and it's increasing my overall total term. So, how do we use total term? The process, use this process. This is kind of the focus. So if you already have the app, total term is appropriate. We want to make sure to make your total term most appropriate. First of all, we want to focus on accuracy of your net worth. We have to get accurate on our spending behavior. It's a lot of times we've talked about this before on the podcast, budgets, burn rate, spending, all these things, whatever you want to call it. Make it less about restricting yourself and more about just being aware.
Right.
Keeping up with what you spend on a monthly basis, for 3 months in a row, it's a habit. You're going to forget a day or two. That's fine. You can guess when you got to guess, but trying to get as accurate as possible, adding up the credit card statements, adding up the, debit card statements, the cash that you pulled out of the ATM, whatever the case may be, just understanding your spending behavior is so important. And even if you've done all that work, it's so important to every once in a while just check in. Like, as much as I know, like, my spending does not change hardly ever. But I will still every, 3, 4, 5 months just record every single transaction on an app, on the Notes app in my iPhone. I just write down the amount, where it went, and at the end of the month I just review it and make sure I'm still kind of within it. Because you'll be surprised.
Still on track.
That spending creep, I think is what they call it, is where you just start spending more and you're not even aware. So accuracy of spending, accuracy of income, accuracy of your assets, accuracy of your debts, all those things are so important to get a more accurate total term. Assess whether the given total term is appropriate. So this is where we start to have conversations, and we'll show you this in a little bit, but factor in things like Social Security, factor in a couple, pieces of the puzzle that might help, move you closer to your goal than you think you might already be. And then through that assessment, we can kind of say, okay, this is probably a focus. One, we'll know about what size of net worth growth we need, understanding if our net worth's going to grow. Do I put it into the business term, the real estate, the qualified bucket? Do I keep it liquid? So that's all part of the assessment that we use. That's total term will help us dictate where money should go in a lot of ways. And total term also tells us a lot about areas that we need to focus on to improve our overall financial health. So let's jump down. We're going to kind of jump down to what is a healthy score of our total term. Bottom line is this: when people get started, I tell them not to be too critical of themselves, right? So where we start, when we see the first exposure to total term, we'll get a number. I tell clients all the time, getting to 10 is a major hurdle. It's hard to get your total term to 10 because basically you're doing all the work. You don't have much by way of assets to really start helping you out. And it takes time. Once you get to 10, things start growing a little faster because now your army of dollars is compounding and growing. You're probably a little older, so you're making more money. You've been paying on your house a little bit longer, so you have a little more equity in your house, and the interest is starting to subside and more of your payments go into principal. So there's a lot of reasons, right? So in this graph here, from the age of about 25 to 35, we typically expect for people to come in and have a total term score of less than 5. And we would expect that their total term growth would be about 0.5 point, maybe 1 point a year, right? From ages 35 to 45, we would like to see people, when we sit down with them, to be somewhere between 5 and 15 on their total term score. And we would probably try to devise a strategy to get their total term to start increasing at a pace of about 1 point per year. And then around 45 to 55, we'd want to see about 15 to 25 on that total term. Looking for, devising plans and strategies to get that annual growth up about 1 to 2 points a year. And then lastly, that 55 and older range, really that's high accumulation, prepping for working through those last couple of years of work. And we should see that total term growth of 2 to 4. So that's the gist of that. And, I think the last piece on this is just understanding. So Josh, like if my total term is, let's say 9, and based on all those numbers that I just gave, it should be closer to 15. Like, what is it that you're going to tell me to focus on to try to course correct?
Yeah, there's a number of things. I mean, you look at your burn rate, your cash flows is the number one place to start. So you want to say, are you spending too much? Are you saving too little? Do you need to make adjustments in your habits of your lifestyle? But I would say that's cash flows is the number one spot.
It is.
I mean, burn rate. Just look at your BR,
Be aware of it. And because it's also helpful too. Like part of my job is to challenge clients into making the best decisions. Sometimes they're already coming in with the best decision. So sometimes I like to play a little bit of a devil's advocate just to stress test their decision and make them feel more confident. Cause even though I had a client on the phone a couple weeks ago, and And he was asking, I was like, dude, like, yeah, I was thinking like you're nailing this. You're already there and you've said all the right things.
Right.
But I just started poking like his plan, trying to like just to see. And
right.
I'm like, dude, you've already thought about everything.
Yep.
Like, and he
it's
just
part
needed,
of our job to challenge
and
clients.
he just needed the affirmation and me being critical every way that I possibly could, in a healthy way, was only reinforcing to himself. Like, he was able to provide the feedback and it just gave him the confidence that he knew he was on track. But he was only able to get there because he was so aware of his financial situation. But yeah, I think when it comes to a total term, when it comes to financial independence, the one thing that we can't control is return on investments, right? If I put my money into an investment, I have little or no control over the outcome, generally, right? Most of the time, I can do a lot of homework. I can look for long-term success in managers or leadership, but it's never guaranteed, right? Returns are never guaranteed. We can look at private equity. We can look at, all kinds of contractual kind of stuff and annuities. And I mean, it's nothing's guaranteed. So with that, I think the awareness of just knowing that if I need to get my net worth from, we'll say, $100,000 to $200,000, the safest way for me to get there is to save another $100,000.
Right.
That's the safest way. Right? If I want to get there quicker, or if I realize I can't get there by myself and I need a little bit of help, the more I rely on investments to help me, the more risk I have to take.
The more risk you're taking.
The more control I'm giving up. Right? And so I think that if you just understand, the more you ask for help, i.e. return of investment, to get to where you want to be, the more risk that you're having to shoulder, the less control you have. That's just really, really important to grasp, because then what you're effectively saying is, hey, I can save like 80 grand. I need $20,000 in return. So I'm going to go after, something that's returning around 10 to 15%. That's quite a bit of risk. So now I understand the trade-off. There's potential loss here.
There's going to be volatility.
There's a lot of that.
But if you expect it, that ride doesn't seem as bumpy.
We're creating awareness. That's that going, like, now I'm aware of the decision. I understand that I don't have a lot of choice if getting to the $200,000 mark is important to me by this certain amount of time, and I could only do 80 on my own. The choice is either to not get to where I need to be, or to rely on some help. And if I'm relying on help, I'm giving up a little bit of control in the situation. So return on investment, out of our control. But what is in our control most of the time, is, one, how much money we save, how we save, where we save it, what kind of savings accounts. These are all things that are in our control, decisions we make. How much we spend is generally, outside of like those cost of necessary items, how much we spend is generally a choice that we make, and we can control it. And then paying down our debt is a choice that we make, and we can control some of that. So to your point, the cash flows are the most critical piece of how do we grow our total term. We want to rely on market performance. I think it's smart to rely. I don't think cash, all of your net worth sitting in cash and you doing all the work, it's not efficient, right?
Right.
But understanding how much help and controlling the amount of risk you're exposed to based on what you feel comfortable with, realizing and creating that awareness that the more risk I take, the more ups and downs, the more sensitive my body and my mind's going to be to things like high inflation. If somebody's completely risk off, high inflation is going to have a different amount of stress than the person who's heavily invested. Thankfully we don't deal with leveraging our clients' assets to invest in equity markets. But there are plenty of people out there right now. Like, I mean, accounts are down,
Yep.
and that sucks for everyone. But what if you took out a $150,000 HELOC
Yeah.
and put it in the market? And so now you have copious amounts of debt. You have your 401k down 20%, but now you have this HELOC where it's borrowed money and you're down, and people have traded on margin.
Margin
people,
accounts are, I feel bad for those people.
There's so
Right
much
now.
out there where people are all like in insanely high levels of anxiety, and that's just because they
Right.
chose to take on a ton more risk than they probably should have. We're gonna jump over. I'm gonna jump over to the app here. You just have to bear with me while I pull it up, because we're gonna kind of dive into. I'll put what I'm looking at on my screen up for you guys to follow along. I just want to make sure. All right. So in this case, I think the biggest thing that we want to look at here is if we go into the elements box down at the bottom. It's the little 3 stack of squares. It says elements in the middle, and in the top right hand corner, you see the colorful boxes. Looks kind of like a periodic table or a Rubik's cube. We're going to click open there, and we see all of our vital signs. Okay. Now, in the lower left hand, the bright green, your total term, your financial freedom box, right? That we want to click in there, and immediately we see our own personal total term at the top. So if you click on that number, so total term, so I'm looking at an imaginary client here, so we don't give away any personal data, but here his total term is 3.2, and I can click on that 3.2 and see. One, it gives me a reminder of what total term is. So it estimates the number of years you could live on your current assets if they did not grow. This includes cash, investments, business equity, and real estate. So again, we're assuming no growth. We're assuming nothing. It's just, hey, this client has $350,000 net worth. They spend a little over $100,000 a year. They could currently live 3.2 years off of what they have. And there's a graph that tracks you so you can see the improvement, or if you're in retirement, you could see the amount of slope, like down, the reliance on what you built in your life on your portfolio. Now, the calculator is the fun part, right? And immediately the thing that jumps out to me when I first look at this is that magic number. So like on yours, Josh, do you know, like, have you seen any of your clients where the magic number is just astronomical?
Well, the total term number?
Yeah, that magic, the retirement goal. So for Dr. Pepper, it's $3.2 million.
Oh,
right?
yeah.
So
It's
in
a
this scenario,
little overwhelming.
yeah, in this scenario, Dr. Pepper is not real, but Dr. Pepper makes $150,000 a year, right? He's so, and he's spending $9,000 a month on his current lifestyle. So the burn rate, that's not terrible. He could probably do a little better. His savings is good, right? But the thing is to continue his lifestyle. If he was to retire tomorrow and still want to spend $9,000 a month, he would need a portfolio of over $3.2 million to be able to do that. $3.2 million, especially in your 20s and 30s, is hard to imagine. Mm-hmm. Especially a person making, 100 or even less a year. That seems like a pretty high number. So what we have to do is we have to start to understand the other features in this calculator to dial this in and make it more individualized for us. So the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to help you guys understand what that annual withdrawal rate is. So in a reliance rate, in a withdrawal rate scenario, healthy is about 4%, right? So if I'm
That's what we like.
if I'm withdrawing assets from my portfolio and I'm taking 4% of my portfolio a year. So if I have $1 million saved up, I could take out $40,000. And if I had $2 million saved up, I could take out $80,000. I think that's good math. Right? So in that sense, that would be a 4% reliance rate. So you can see if we're trying to take $9,000 a month, that's like $108,000 a year. $108,000, 4% of what is 108? That's the 3.2 million. Okay. Or sorry, that's 3.3%. So if you're conservative, right? If you're really nervous about your future and you just want to make sure as best as you can that you don't want to run out of money, we're going to move your reliance rate from 4
to
down.
3 year down. Yeah.
Right. And so 3.3, that's the default on this calculator, is ultra conservative, right? If you want to slide, if Dr. Pepper was saying, I'm not ultra conservative, take a little bit of risk. I think the world's going to do fine, and I'm going to do fine. I got people that love me if I don't. Let's go ahead and move that reliance rate up to 4. So you can kind of see now that took that $3.2 million nest egg goal down to $2.7 million. Okay. And if you wanted to be even more aggressive on the reliance rate, you could probably go up pretty reasonably, but also aggressively, a little bit more risk, going up to about 4.5 on the reliance rate. That would mean that you would need more performance from your investments in your retirement years. Typically, you want to de-risk a little bit as you get older so that there's less volatility on the accounts that are providing you income. But in this case, maybe you're just a risk-on person. Usually like 4.5 is good for me. But we're going to leave it at 4. What we're going to change now, though, is Dr. Pepper is spending $9,000 a month today. And he's happy. He does the things he loves. He travels. He spends time with friends. He has hobbies. And, we don't know what the future is going to look like. We had this conversation. Was it last time on the podcast?
Yeah.
We were talking about the electric bill.
Electric bill, yeah.
We don't even know if we're going to be using the same type of
energy sources, whatever. Yeah.
We're not. We may not. So it's hard to predict what things will cost. And of course, there's future dollars and today's dollars and all those kinds of conversions, time value of money. There's all kinds of different math equations to throw in there. But instead of trying to guess what the future looks like, if we just kind of assume similar situations, like if there's something that you're not doing right now, like I'm not taking nearly as many vacations as I'd like to take in a year, right? Someday I would like to try to travel a little bit more. So if I'm spending $10,000 a month and I know that I want to travel, I want a big vacation once a year, maybe I should go ahead and estimate $11,000 a month, because that would basically be $12,000 a year extra. That would fund a really nice vacation, right? So in that sense, we can kind of play those games a little bit, but for the most part, I'm very content with what I'm doing with my life. I'm also saving money right now because I'm young, and I'm saving for me when I'm old and don't work as much. So in that sense, that savings money will be available for me to spend now. So there's a lot of considerations about what future money will look like. But we like to just say, hey, if you're spending it now and you're happy, let's just use that number for now.
Yeah, just assume that for now.
So again, he's spending $9,000 a month now. What happens if he were to retire tomorrow? Let's say Dr. Pepper was going to be 65 tomorrow and he wanted to hang up the hat. He is going to start taking Social Security, and his Social Security is going to be $2,500 a month, right? So all we're going to do now is we're going to slide down this 9,000 down to 6,500. All right. And if we go down to 6,500 on that 4% reliance rate, his new magic number is now 1.9 million, 1.95. All right. Based on what Dr. Pepper currently has, to get to 1.95, we would need an average net worth growth of just shy of $60,000 a year. So let's talk about that for a second. If I want my net worth to increase by $60,000, do I need to save $60,000 out of my 150 of income? And the answer is not necessarily. Right? Maybe, but not necessarily. Dr. Pepper owns a house. His house is going to likely appreciate most years, right? And so if it appreciates by $5,000, now he only needs to save $55,000. But he also participates in his 401k. And
so he maxes it out.
And he maxes it out, so that's, we'll call it $20,000.
Yep.
And his employer also matches at 4%. So that would be another $6,000. So that's 31 plus the 5. Now we're at 36. Let's say he maxes out an IRA and a Roth or traditional account or traditional IRA. So that's another $6,000, right? Let's say the investment markets did return a 6% return on that year.
Right.
So you could see that you don't necessarily have to save every dollar. It doesn't mean I'm taking my income from 150 down to 90 just because I need to save $60,000 a year.
Right.
There's a lot of things but again, every time I rely on market performance,
that's the risk that you're taking.
I'm trading off some control or giving up some control for some chance at some help to get that 60,000 average annual net worth. And the critical piece here is it's average. So we know that there's going to be months where it's more, months where it's less. But in this case, Social Security took him down from $9,000 spending as far as what we're relying on the portfolio to $6,500. And let's say Dr. Pepper also worked at a state hospital.
Got a pension.
He's going to get a pension. We'll call that pension another $1,500, right? So let's just bring that $6,500 down to $4,000. And when we get to that $4,000,
which I would assume the majority of people listening to this podcast aren't getting pensions.
That's true. So maybe Social Security is the only thing that you have. But if you do get the pension, you can factor in your pension this way. And in that case, his magic number is 1.2 million. And now he only needs an average net worth growth of about $32,000 a year. So now all of a sudden,
now it seems a little more realistic.
It's making $150K a year. Can I save $30,000? Can I do $30,000 on my own? Probably. If I have a 401k, will that match help? Absolutely. But can I also rely on some market performance? Can I get some real estate property? Can I get a rental income? A rental property? Can I do some things that I'm purchasing assets that are going to appreciate over time? Or do I want to swing for the fences? So one other piece to this calculator is, let's say, hey, I could have done $60K a year, but once I put in that pension, now it's only 30. So now I can retire, slide that retirement age from 65. I can start sliding it down to where that number turns into 60 again. Now all of a sudden I can retire at 52.
5 years sooner. Yeah.
52. So no, it's 13 years sooner.
Okay.
Right. So because Dr. Pepper does believe that he can have a more aggressive savings plan and net worth growth plan, and he feels that he can grow his net worth at $60K a year, he's going to rely on the market. He's making these choices. He just moved his retirement age from 65
to 52
down to 52. What's that tell us is we know inside of those components, going back to the components of total term, that tells me I need to come up with a strategy where he is going to have a lot more representation of his total term in his liquid term bucket.
Right.
Because we are going to have to find ways to carry him from 52
to 59 and a half.
To 59 and a half, or, if he has a sizable 401k, maybe 55. There's some ways that you can rely on your 401k a little bit before 59 and a half. But that becomes...
And I feel like that conversation happens more now with people wanting to be work optional. They don't think about, they're like, oh yeah, I'm, max my 401k out. I'm putting money in a Roth or a traditional IRA or whatever. But they don't think about, oh yeah, by the way, I wanted to retire when I'm 55. Well, what are you going to do for those 4.5 years where you can't take any IRA money out or, the qualified bucket?
It gets tough.
So they don't think about that liquid term, that taxable account. You need to start building that up.
Yeah. And it's also important to understanding these are nothing more than gauges to understand where I'm at and is my trajectory going the right way. But because of the breakdown from total term into those individual term buckets, it also helps you understand maybe look into the future and understand decisions that you're going to have to come across. Like if if we have clients that do extraordinarily well in real estate, and they do a ton of, I mean, they have rental properties
Right.
and commercial buildings and all this stuff. But, it's like, understand that there is a chance that if you want to fully retire and rely on your bucket of money to pay you the lifestyle that you want to make, you might have to sell some of these assets, because if RT is a part of total term, and we don't, like, if we know we don't want to sell any of the properties in the future, then we have to reduce that total term, because the real estate term is actually not real. It's not a real asset for that I have access to in retirement.
It's not liquid.
If I'm saying that I don't want to sell it.
Right. It's not liquid.
It's not liquid. So, like, we have clients that have I have an older client that has a couple properties around Franklin, and those are for his kids. He's not going to get rid of them. And so for him, his total term is extremely high, but it needed to be extremely high because a bulk of his net worth
in the RT bucket.
is what he's choosing not to touch.
Right.
So we had to get his total term a little higher so he could then have a legacy story as well. So those are the kind of pieces of the puzzle there, and how it all starts to fit together. And again, at the end of the day, what I can know is I can look at my total term and say, this is healthy. It's progressing the right direction.
Right.
I'm doing the work, and it's showing up as progress. There's so many people, I see it all the time, where they're doing the right things as far as they know, but just small mistakes are totally derailing things. I had a person, client come in, sizable chunk of money in their 401k, and it was a respectable amount. I think 30 or 40 grand they had been saving away for a couple years. This was like through 2017, 2018, 2019 timeframe, when the market was really on a roar. And the person came in and he's like, I don't really know what I'm doing wrong. Like, I'm like, well, let's take a look. And he's like, I'm putting all this money in, but it's just not growing. 3 years, some of the best market growth we've seen on a consistent long-term basis. He was investing in a cash fund.
He was in money market.
He was in a money market fund and had no idea.
Yep.
Right. So the thing is it doesn't take a lot of work to change one thing. Right. He could have just logged in, went from money market to an equity fund, or money market and equity and bond fund, or, whatever. But he didn't know because he wasn't aware, because he wasn't tracking progress.
Yep.
If he would have been in the app and saying, hey, I keep putting $1,000 in and my net worth is only going up by $1,000, but I thought this tool was supposed to provide me some help and support because I'm taking risk. He could have asked that question years before he actually came around to it. So don't make the mistake of making healthy decisions that aren't all the way healthy, or don't make even worse. What I see people, like, I have a client that has a good financial idea almost every other month of his life, but only about 2 in the past 2 years have been financial decisions that I feel are actually getting him closer to his goals.
Right.
None of the other ones are like bad financial decisions. For anyone else with different goals, they could be great. But what he's doing is he's hearing these good ideas, or is seeing his successful buddies
taking him off track,
do these things, and he's like, then he gets the idea, hey, I want to do this too because it was good for my buddy, or my buddy, it worked out really well. But then when he comes and talks to me, and I'm like, hey man, like, that's a good thing.
Yep.
But it's not good for you because you're wanting to go left, and this is taking you right. And we need to make sure that, like, your buddies are going right. Their goals are to the right. They're doing the right thing for them, and it feels better and it looks better because it's in line with their goals.
But it's not in line with yours.
But it's not. And so even we could be just as successful or even more successful, but you're not going to feel better because it's not taking you closer to your goal. That thing that matters most, that really, really important piece of life, what you're trying to accomplish, the people you're trying to care for. If the good idea fairy drops something on your lap that takes you away from that, it could go extraordinarily well, but you still might feel empty or lost or not closer to achieving what really matters. And that's hard. So Total term provides so much, but most importantly, I think if it's used right and you have accurate numbers and you're monitoring and keeping up with this stuff on a monthly basis, like it's not something that you have to live in all the time. But if you log in, you update these things once a month, and you're staying and you have goals and those are all accounted for, I think what this does is it answers the question, am I on track? And even in time periods like heavy inflation, the hawkish
bear
Fed,
markets,
earnings collapsing, global, shipping debacles and geopolitical stuff, and, China and US and Taiwan and Russia and Ukraine and, the Bank of England and all these things going on. And it's just like, you know what? We've been in turmoil before as a globe. It's always we find ways to work our way through it one way or another. And on the backside, I'll be better because, and I'm not going to lose my mind, and I'm not going to not find my feet, and I'm not going to walk around being anxious because I have an anchoring point. My total term is 10. And if I do these 3 things, it'll be 11, or these 4 things or whatever. And that's what I'm going to focus on. Right. And I'm also going to create this lovely life balance of happy now, happy later. So I'm not going to overwhelm my saving strategy and feel like I can't do anything fun right now. Right. Still going to take the vacation, still going to go see my buddy, still going to go do this, and this. But I also have a plan and a strategy set in place to get me to where I want to be. And that's total term.
Love it.
Any final thoughts?
Nope.
Let's go watch some football. Y'all have a good time. Thanks for joining us. We'll talk to you soon. We hope you learned from our conversation today. It is important to us that you know this is for educational purposes and not intended to be considered specific advice for any individual listener. If something we discussed is relevant to you and you have questions of how it might be applicable to your specific situation, please reach out to your financial professional. Of course, we are happy to have further conversations with you regarding specific questions or applications to your individual financial situation. With that, here are a few disclosures. Securities offered through LPL Financial, member FINRA, SIPC. Investment advice offered through Private Advisor Group, a registered investment advisor. Private Advisor Group and Harpeth Wealth Partners are separate entities from LPL Financial. The opinions voiced in this material are for general information only and are not intended to provide specific advice or recommendations for any individual. To determine which strategies or investments may be suitable for you, consult the appropriate qualified professional prior to making a decision. All performance referenced is historical and is no guarantee of future results. All indices are unmanaged and may not be invested into directly. Hypothetical examples presented are not representative of any specific investments. Your results may vary. With that, thank you, and we look forward to having you back. Take care.